This week on Brupeg, Jess opens some engine nappies, I do some housework, we have a conversation about converting to steam, we install a large fan, and we really struggle to tell the time with analogue clocks. Brupeg was a sunken fishing trawler that's been brought back to life with the help of volunteers and funded by our Patreon community and supporters. She'll be crewed by passionate people from around the world. If you'd like to be involved and support the project, please consider joining us on Patreon or subscribe to the channel on YouTube. This morning's job is getting these cleaned up and painted. Jess is doing a race into town. She's picking up some parts. We took the dinghy out for a spin, so that's been, we just dragged it off the roof. Outboard's going blimmin' awesome. So between this wee dinghy and that wee dinghy there, we've got ourselves enough transport to get to and from the shore while we're building this thing on anchor. So I need to pressure test this area here. Before I can paint it, I need to make sure that we've got no holes. So we've got a bung just down there, you can see that one right there. That's done up tight with thread sealant, so that should be fine. I've got my gauge just there with a little on-off valve and the pressure line set up, and the bung at the very bottom has been tapped and taped up, and then it has a 3/8 bung in it, so that should be nice and tight. This tank's not a pressure vessel, so I can't put bucket loads of pressure in this thing. It's not round, it's got flat sides, it doesn't have a lot of rigidity in terms of taking air pressure or, you know, a pressure from inside. So I only want to go maybe 5 psi max. Essentially what I need to do is put that 5 psi in and then go around with the soapy water, as you see me do on a few other things, dinghies and whatever else, to pressure test. Now, hydro testing would be better, but I don't want to hydro test this because then we've got to get rid of 600 litres of oily water. So we're going to air test this and then basically sign that off from an air point of view. There's never going to be pressure in this tank. It's always going to be just a whatever the temperature of the water will be the temperature of the tank, and it's very rarely that it's going to fluctuate. You know, essentially the sea has to get warmer or colder in order for that tank pressure to fluctuate. And it's very easy for us to relieve any pressure by just cracking a valve open and then turning the valve back off, and any pressure that's built up in that tank releases out into the air. So let's put a bit of pressure in this thing. Alright, we've got some bucket holes going on down the back. We've got a doozy just down in here. And then there's another one just down in there. So, get the welder out. I would leave you with some lovely ambient sounds of welding, but I've got the hairdryer 3000 running down the back, and no one can hear anything in here. Because I don't necessarily need to add more filler, I just need to blend the metal that's already there over. I'm using TIG rather than MIG to try and blend this in. Now, occasionally you'll see some little sparklers come off this TIG like that. That's pretty normal when you're welding compromised steel, as in like there's impurities and maybe bits of old paint, that sort of thing in the steel. It's not perfect at this stage. So I'm not 100% certain if my TIG welding down there has solved the leak, but let's go and put some air pressure in. See. It's sounding better. Right, so the leaks on this side are solved. So there's nothing happening down there. I do have a row of 3 in that seam there that I need to fix. And then we should be pretty good. Hopefully this has got it. So we've done that one there, and if I spin around the front here, we've done that sort of little puddle there. I think there might be a pinhole still in that one, but we'll just put some air in and we'll see. Oh, she's holding pressure. Okay, there's still an air leak, but now that we've got those big buggers done, we'll get the soapy water in there and we'll start figuring out where these small wee ones are. So we just got the post, and 2 of these arrived, and this is what's inside. It is a whole bunch of thermal blankets. So these get wrapped around the exhaust. So they're 20mm thick. They got like an aluminium foil type cover on one side, and they're a ceramic aerogel on the inside. So these basically, bunch of these get wrapped around the exhaust to keep the heat in the exhaust and out of the engine room. 4 of these as a test. From memory, they were 50 centimeters that way, 60 centimeters that way, and we're going to wrap them around the exhaust.
Got some exhaust stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, nice, okay.
I think it's going to work out right, eh?
Gosh, it's quite thick, isn't it?
Yeah, 20mm thick, that stuff. And you can get 30mm thick too. So this is ceramic, like it's a ceramic aerogel.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it looks like what's that stuff called
Asbestos.
cotton wool.
Yeah, it does look like cotton wool. Yeah,
So looks like something you find in a doona or a duvet or something.
yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Okay, so you've got enough. That's exciting. So it's also starting to happen.
Ceramic aluminium nappies.
Good like that. That's awesome. Okay, baby, let me feed you.
Now that the pressure testing's done, it's time to start getting some paint onto this area of the boat. Now, the paint that's in here is relatively fresh. Jason and Birk helped paint this about 6 or 8 months ago. The issue that we have is there's been a lot of weld splatter, and that's ruined some of the paint in there, so we're sanding it back with 40 grit so that we can put a fresh coat in there.
You can see Dame's taking a break. Some of these jobs really just wear him out, but he just keeps going.
With the sanding finished, it's time to start cleaning this up, ready for paint. Because there were so many impurities in this part of the boat from everything that we did with the oil tank, the welding, sanding, etc. The only way to get this really clean was to give it a hot water soapy scrub. So we got in there with brushes and give every single corner of this a really good scrub out so that it was spotless. Then we let it sit for 12 hours with some hot air blowing over it to dry. So we're ready to start laying down some paint underneath this engine gearbox. Got it over here. We're using Gearbox 90. Normally we use a grey Gearbox 90, that colour you can see on the beds there, but we're actually using white. Run out of grey, we're using a white. It's exactly the same paint, just a different colour. So the floor is going to go white to start with, and then we're going to be putting a full gloss white, which you might be able to see down here. We're going to redo all of this in here as well because it's pretty grubby from all the work. So yeah, time to get this etch on.
Oh, darling. You're a master. You need a big break? That looks amazing. Cars are like a golfer's.
Yeah, I've got a flat cap basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Jess is out here employing a new workbench, and the cat keeps diving in and out. What are you doing? Oh, she's gone now. Big long box. It's the day we're getting some paint into the bilge, and it's the stinky paint, so I've had a full shave so that my mask actually seals and I don't die. The top coat that we use is Jotun. In fact, all the paint that we use practically is Jotun, but the top coat we use specifically is Hardtop Ultra. Hardtop Ultra is a full gloss paint, polyurethane, 2-pack. It's very strong. It's not real thick, so it kind of goes on not much runny, not much thicker than water. So you could do 2, sometimes 3 coats, but it's a good price and it's a very good paint. Lasts a long time. I've seen trawlers painted this last 25 years with the external hull paint. So pretty good product, and that's why we use it. The commercial guys do it. This paint is self-leveling, so if you put really thin coats on, which is generally the best way to paint, it doesn't have enough paint to self-level, but if you put a slightly thicker than normal coat on, it will self-level out, and the amount of paint actually comes back down to a thin amount, but it levels out and it drips off the side essentially, which is fine. You end up with runs off the side, but you end up with a beautifully smooth front face, if that makes sense. So that's why I paint that way with this particular paint. It's a very thin paint to start with.
Look at this adjuster.
This is our 3/4 torque wrench.
Isn't that so good?
Bit of a beast.
Yeah.
I don't use it very often and I can't remember how to put and tighten it up.
It's so big it's got its own little...
crank handle. So just to give you an idea in terms of foot-pound, this starts at 120. So 120 is over here, 600 foot-pounds over there.
And you guys are thinking 120 for the...
I'm going to go about 150, which is about only just off the scale on this thing.
To be fair, that thing is freaking ginormous.
It's amazing, eh? Today's a momentous day. And although Dame is like another day, another job, it's really a special day. It's been years of working at this and a wall full of donors and supporters that have got us here. So today's the day of the alignment of the motor.
Thank you for getting us here.
Yeah.
To everybody that's been involved in the project and supported us and helped us and commented and liked and told us what we're doing wrong and everything. Thank you for all of it. It's been bloody amazing to be able to do this.
But thank you. He's just too humble to acknowledge what he's done, but it's been 9 years of persistence against incredible odds, really, and we're here. So the guys are going to get it done, and I'm going to watch the first mount go on because I'm really so happy that it's happening today. And it looks like we're making real progress towards launch, so which of course is what it's all about.
Yeah, launching next Wednesday.
Don't believe a word he says.
Come in. Are you right?
I think so.
Okay. All right, we're on a timeline. Let's get a bottom one in so we can line them up.
Do you want me to do one while you're...
Yeah, if you can do that, that'd be great. Should be good. So the Loctite that we put on sets basically once it loses, I can't remember if it loses oxygen or gains oxygen, but basically it sets after a while. So if I don't tighten them up right away, they'll be loose and locked. That's the front adjuster bolt. It was only threaded to there, so I had to redo the thread yesterday. Took it all the way down. Here Birk's cleaning out the threads with brake clean, then blowing it out with air or the rag to stop all the rubbish going everywhere before we can use our Loctite in there. It's really critical to make sure your threads are clean whenever you're putting Loctite on something. So we've got mounts on with our adjustable bolts, the jacking screws, and then over here, this is our front mount assembled. So you can see we've got an adjuster here, here, and here. So we can do vertical with this one and we can do side to side with these guys here. So time to start lifting the motor up. Before I forget, same deal over the back there, we've got the adjuster screws and that one there. So we're ready to start putting the motor down in the hole.
This is one of the things we do on our day off, is we watch things we really enjoy and find inspiring. We really want to introduce you to Hank Young on his channel. He's amazing.
So Birk introduced us to Hank Young. He's a trawlerman in the Netherlands. He's got a boat similar size to Brupeg. It's awesome to see him bashing around out on the English Channel and the North Sea and so on. He's got an awesome channel. We want to introduce you to his channel firstly so you can check him out and subscribe to his channel. But he's also had a stroke of bad luck with his twin Perkins in his boat. We want to share that with you guys because we think our awesome community may actually be able to help him out.
Yes, it is coffee time aboard motor vessel Lady Lieselot. Hi to everyone, I am Hank Jan and I am aboard motor vessel Lady Lieselot and we are based in the Netherlands. A big hi to Jess, Damien and Birk and everybody who is behind this great channel. I would say good luck on getting launched. Cheers!
We know what it takes to run a channel and really fight for a dream, and Henk Young is someone that keeps us inspired on a weekly basis. One of the issues that he's had recently is he has 20 engines in his boat, and both of them had the same problem, knock both engines out of operation within the matter of hours. And it's something that may end up needing to be a complete engine replacement. He's fighting for his dream at the moment to keep his idea of this boat journey alive. And we really want our audience to know about him so that if they can support him on his GoFundMe to try and resurrect his engines. He also is trying something new. He's offered a paid episode on a full diagnosis of everything that happened, what happened with the motors and what he believes is going on with the internals and so on. So it's a really interesting way to try and fund and support a dream, and we'd love for you guys to know about it. There's a link in the description below if you're curious about Henk Young's channel.
And a big thanks to Birk for introducing us to Henk. As always, Birk, you always seem to know what's needed right at the right moment. Good luck, Henk. We're rooting for you.
Well, why don't we go up and take the weight?
Yeah.
Clear out all the blocks and stuff.
Yeah.
We're quite loose on this one, so
Yeah. Keep going.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, let's lose that. Okay, this is the last time that we're going to be putting this sand seal together, so I've put some anti-seize on it just to help that first start up. That is a helicopter driving past, in case you're wondering. So this face here, let me just pull it back, this face here and this face here rub together like so. That's up there nice and tight. Now what we need to do is compress this, like remove this distance here and then compress this rubber O-ring that you can sort of see possibly at the very back end of this sand seal. That needs to compress 3mm. So I'm going to use my dial gauge to do that, but for now we just need to basically use the jack. We'll jack the whole lot forward until they touch, until we're happy, and we can spin that but there's no movement in it per se, like the forward and back movement, and then we'll do the dial gauge crush thing. You go there? Yep.
That's enough.
Keep going as much as you can, pretty much. Yep. Yeah, I might be able to get the jack in there now. Now that we've got the sand seal to bind up, just gently touching, it's time to get the dial gauge in there and then get a really accurate measurement. We need to push this propeller forward 3mm from the time that that rubber O-ring binds up against the sand seal. Okay, we're going to bring it up to 0, so come up gently. 5, 4, 3, 2, hold there. 1, just go a touch more. Yeah, that's fine. We're just a touch over 3mm, 3.01. So with this shaft basically free floating, you can see it's not connected in any way to the gearbox over here. There's no bearings, so you can see this is our stern gland here. It's all 3 bolts, one there, and one there, that hold it in are loose. So there's no pressure holding the shaft any which way. It can essentially free float. So what we've done is we've got our magnet base clamped on, so there's no chance it can move because the magnet's crap. we've clamped it all up nice and tight. We've got our nice new dial gauge that we're measuring down onto this. I can't get it to reach to this. I would have loved to measure here, but I can't get it to reach to it. So measuring off this here, but we've got it zeroed. So there we go, have it zeroed. And let's go and do some measurements, see how much float we've got on the end of this shaft. A dial gauge basically is an incredibly accurate way of measuring distance. So this here will move up and down, and the dial moves around. It's spinning quite fast at the moment, but it moves up and down to tell you how far you've got. So if I zero that out, basically put that out there, and move this around until we get it to bang on 0, which is not quite. It's as close as I can see from where I'm standing to get 0. So what we need to do is lift, so the shaft is gravity's pushing it right down to the bottom of the, like where it's going to sit. We need to now lift it up using a crowbar. I've got a crowbar at the front here to lift it up, and this dial needle will move up, and whatever the number it moves up to, that's the maximum amount of movement we've got in this shaft. And then we just need to set it so that it sits halfway, and then we know that the shaft itself is sitting halfway in the bearings. It's not like pressing down on one side, and it essentially means that you're taking account of the weight of the shaft as well. So you'll see that come up. I'll do that, and then go back down. So it's, you can see we're talking 0.01 of a millimeter. So for our friends in America, that's the correct measurement term. And for everybody else in the world, you'll know that that's a very small amount of movement. So we've got 0.19 millimeters of movement from the shaft right down to the shaft right up. So call it 0.2 just to make maths easy. We're going to lift the shaft 0.1 of a millimeter, so 10% of a millimeter, and that will give us our center in the bearings.
Jess is not falling asleep to the soft dulcet tones of hammering something in the engine room. She's trying to read the dial gauge because I can't actually see it at this angle.
Alright, now that we've got the shaft itself centered in its tube, it's time to work on the engine. We need to get the engine moved up and down, left, right, etc., so that we can get the two faces on the output shaft of the gearbox and the input shaft for the propeller, so that they line up and we can get them mated together. Look at that first scratch of paint. We know the gearbox is tight, but we've got too much room there and we've got not enough on this side. We're almost touching on this side, pretty much are touching on this side. And you can sort of see the flange, the output shaft on the gearbox is sticking over to the left, and over here it's still sticking over to the left. So we need to shunt the whole thing over about probably, I would say, 20 mil. We've got our side-to-side alignment pretty good now. We need to work on moving the whole engine back, so the engine needs to come back to that propeller shaft. So straps are on the back of the gearbox, pulling up on an angle. We're not trying to lift, we're just trying to drag at this point. So there's not a huge amount of weight on this chain block, and it is going to slide along on the jacking screws. It's going to slide back on those mounts. The reason we're trying to do that is because we want the front, let me show you the front end, we want the front to come back on the mount a bit better. Bang, you can see there the mount, it's hanging over the front. Pretty precarious, but we've got to get it back. So shouldn't be a problem, we'll just drag it and we'll be able to get everything back where it needs to go. Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. We're miles out on alignment, but that's all good. Front engine mount is now bolted in. So we've got a couple of bolts holding it tight, two on either side. We're now able to use the jacking screws and the one in the middle just down the bottom there. Birk's just winding that up. And what we need to do is lift this up 20 mil, and then we can start going side to side with these jacking screws here. These ones we're not touching for now. We don't need to. What we do need to do is bring the whole assembly sideways. So if you look down here though, or all down, you can see we're about 5 mil away from the prop shaft flange, too far over to the left, and exactly the same story over here, about 5 mil too far over to the left. So not that I was expecting it to be different left to right. So what we need to do is get our pry bar. There's a set of Milwaukee pry bars that was donated by Dennis. We need to get these in here, like that, and then we should be able to just gently hoik. I'm going to do that with 2 hands.
Now that we got the engine sitting roughly where it needs to be, it's much easier to start the alignment now when we are able to use all of the jacking screws. You can sort of see with these jacking screws, it makes alignment super easy because you're not trying to take just random stabs in the dark when you're using shims. You're able to really finely tune it by just giving it a tweak here and there, left, right, up, down, etc. And you can end up with your alignment being absolutely spot on.
So what I'm trying to do is remove some of the gap on that side. Okay, hold there.
Yep.
I think that's close to parallel. Let's go and see if we can start measuring this up. Okay, time to start aligning the engine. Now, we've sort of shown a little bit of the process of that, but basically the process that we're going to be following, we're incredibly limited by how much room we've got to work with around the prop shaft and so on. So we can't get a full 360-degree spin with the dial gauge locked onto either the prop or the gearbox because various reasons. I can show you those as we go through it, but just trust us, you can't spin 360 when you're aligning this. It's just one of the limitations of aligning this particular shaft in this boat. So what we're going to do is use feeler gauges to get it as close as we can, and then we're going to try and dial gauge in right at the end to get the center to center alignment. But for now, we're going to get the flanges and everything in the engine and the general sort of alignment as close as we can with feeler gauges, and then press on from there. If you look down the bottom, you can see we've got some blocks of wood basically holding this prop shaft up. So what we did was put the dial gauge, we clamped it onto our new bed here, and we dial gauged onto the flange, and then moved the prop shaft up and down to figure out exactly how much height we've got to play with. So it's 0.2 of a millimeter from bottom to top, so we moved it up 0.1, and that allows us to know that the shaft is sitting central in the bearing, so we're not basically having gravity push the shaft down sitting on the bottom of the bearings and then aligning to that point. We're aligning it to the center of the shaft itself. So using feeler gauges, we go through and figure out if the two faces are parallel with each other. Once these two distances are known, we know exactly how far out the alignment is. Okay, can you adjust the engine across that way? We need to screw that adjuster in.
Yep.
And then using the adjusting bolts or jacking screws, you can really easily dial in the engine to sit exactly where you want it to. After we make one adjustment, we have to check all of the measurements. So we're back to checking our flange parallel using the feeler gauges, and we'll check both sides. That gives us an approximation for where the engine's sitting horizontally. Once that's complete, we can start moving on to the top and start figuring out if we need to alter vertical adjustment. Okay, so we're within nothing, like top and bottom.
Yep.
Side to side. We're practically nothing side to side as well. It's like perfect. So we just chain blocked the engine forward. You can see the chain blocks on either side, and it's so that we can see down here. You can sort of see that torch shining between the shaft and the flange. What we needed to do is make sure that the engine wasn't bumping up against anything, so it was completely free. And what that allows, get a feeler gauge in here, stack those up in the air, that's nice and tight. And then on this side, we can do exactly the same with no change. On the top, that's in there nice and lovely. And then same deal on the bottom. You probably can't see this, but I can get that. There we go, that's tucked in there. Perfect on the bottom. So I don't know what the measurement is, but it's absolutely like millimeter perfect. Now that we've got the alignment like flange to flange, face to face, pretty much perfect. Like we're not going to get it any better than that. It's so close to being like, you know, smack on where it needs to be that we're just not going to get it any better than that. What we need to do now is make sure our center to center alignment is correct. So that's where we get the dial gauge and we spin it around the shaft as much as we can. Now this is going to be a challenge because we just don't have much room to work. But knowing that the rest of it is pretty much as accurate as we're ever going to get it, it will make the job a little bit easier. So now that we've got that done, we can go back to the dial gauge. So we're probably going to be bouncing between the dial gauge and the feeler gauges a couple of times just to make sure. We've adjusted the heights of the beds so that they're roughly the same as each other. So when we put the chock fast in, we're not going to have one that's big and the engine on a slight angle or anything like that. So these are even. Face to face, we're good. Now we've got to get center to center. Alright, we're trying to get the dial indicator to fit around here, but with our blocks that we've just taken the blocks out over there, with our blocks that we're jamming up underneath the prop shaft that we're holding a prop in the center of its bearings,
they were getting in the way. They were just a pain. So what we're going to do is move them back here somewhere, so we've got a bit of room and that shaft flange and everything's all clear. Then we're going to modify the dial gauge. We've got 2 dial gauge bases now. We're going to cut one of the vertical stalk things. We're going to cut that down low, screw it in so that we've got a really tight, that one there, we're going to cut that down nice and low. So we've got a really tight, stubby little dial gauge that can magnet onto the output shaft of the gearbox. And that's going to allow us to dial gauge onto this. We were thinking we'll dial gauge onto here, but we're going to go with this flange here if we can. That's my preference. And it will be machined. It would have been machined at the same time as they've made these. So we'll take all the paint off on that and get that up to a standard where we can dial gauge onto that as well. We've had a slight adjustment of priority, so we've brought the prop back up. We dropped it back out, and so we could sand it. We've brought it back up, and we've compressed the O-ring 3mm, so the prop is sitting where it needs to. We're going to move the motor back so it's touching face to face. Then we're going to back the prop off again so that we can actually rotate the prop end, and also prop up this end to take account of the bearing slack.
Yep.
Just like that. Now what we need to do, the engine is sitting where it needs to sit. We now need to make sure that this prop shaft and the engine are where they need to go. So we need to check vertical run out on the shaft, and then we need to compensate for that with blocks of wood, and then start our measurements. Okay, we couldn't get the shim idea underneath the shaft to work properly, so what we've done is dial gauged everything and tightened the crap out of the packing in the stern gland, which has centered it. This is a taper, so it's centered it in the shaft. And then we're going to, and we've dial gauged it up, so we've seen that it's sitting bang on where it needs to sit. So we know we can't rotate this, but we know that it's sitting in the right spot. Now we can start running the dial gauge around to get our center to center alignment done. Before I get into the engine and finish that alignment off, I need to actually make a template up on the roof of Brupeg for our laser. We have a laser dinghy that we like to go out and sail in, and we need to store that on the boat somehow, so we're going to be putting it upside down on the wheelhouse roof when it's not in use. So we need to make some templates so Jess can finish the brackets needed to hold the dinghy down to the roof. We've just had a week of horrific dust in the yard, and that's why our solar panels are covered in rubbish. But our dinghy will be sitting across these solar panels when not in use. So this wheelhouse roof is sort of compromised from a solar point of view when we're not using it, like when everything's stored. The laser sailing dinghy will be up the top here, and we'll be building a crane roughly in this area here so we can lift the laser off, and also the aluminium dinghy that will sit in that area there. But what we need to do is make some timber brackets that bolt onto the back of the wheelhouse roof here, and then also to that diagonal bit there, so that we can sit the dinghy on it comfortably when we're at sea. So status update, you can see the dial gauge base is on the side there. I've got my show spanner onto one of the bolts around the back there, you can sort of see there. Now we don't have it touching, so there's quite a bit of clearance down in here. So what the plan is put all the dial gauge assembly on there and spin it all the way around. We can get 3/4 of the way around, which is enough. Ideally you want to get all the way around, but it doesn't matter. If you can get 3/4, you'll be able to do the exact same alignment, just takes a bit more time. So now that we've got the space to do that, we've even shortened down this here. So this here is half the length of the original. We butchered one of the old ones to do that. So going to assemble it all up and then see if we can dial gauge this up now. So this method of aligning is called the edge and face alignment method, and the face is basically where we're getting the feeler gauges and going around and sticking those in that little gap and seeing if the face to face alignment is correct. The edge is where we roll the dial gauge around the outside and make sure that we've got the two shafts located down the center line of each shaft. I'll do a quick drawing and show you what we're trying to achieve with the dial gauge. So if you've got your shaft, there's your circle of your shaft there. What you want to do ideally is have 4 points of contact that you're measuring. So you want to have your dial gauge read the same here and here and here and here. So if you can zero it all the way around, you know that the shaft, the center line of the shaft is perfect to the center line of the other shaft. Now if your other opposing flange is not round like this one, what you're going to find is the center of this one will be over here somewhere. So you're going to have maybe the same reading here and here, but you have very different reading here and here. So that's why you need to have the 4 points so that you can figure out, top to bottom, side to side, is it absolutely where it needs to be. Now, if you can't get top to bottom, side to side like we can't, so if I come back here, we're not going to be able to measure up in here, we just don't have enough room. So what we can do, take my drawing again, rotate it. If we can get 4 points, one over here, one down there, one up here, and one right down the bottom, we'll be able to achieve exactly the same thing. Okay, what I want to show you, I've zeroed the gauge out, and you can see where it's sitting. It's sitting on a tiny bit of paint, and if I rotate that around, you can immediately see the gauge drops off quite dramatically, almost 0.3 of a millimetre. But if I keep rotating around, the gauge itself hardly varies. It's only varying 0.05 of a mil, maybe 0.1 of a mil sort of thing as we go around. So if I come back, you can see that variation. It really doesn't move that much until you get to that paint. And then you can see this great big jump happen. So we need to go around and prep the surface better. One of the downsides of not measuring top and bottom side to side and doing a crisscross fashion is that it does make moving the engine up and down a bit more complicated when you're trying to align it. If you can measure side to side up and down, you can literally move the engine side to side up and down to allow for that measurement error. However, if you've got an angle, you know, if you're out on a diagonal, you kind of have to move it across and up. So it does take a bit more time doing it that way. That's why the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock is always preferred. I haven't spun it around yet, just set it up, so I've kind of got no idea how in or out this is going to be. So let's go. We are reading -10. There's two numbers on the gauge. So the big dial, I've zeroed that out. One turn of that is 1 millimetre, and then you got that little wee dial just there. This is an endless dial gauge basically. So one turn of that is 10 millimetres. So there's 10 numbers on there, 0 to 9. So every one of those is one full revolution of that. So I need to know what number I'm on here, 7 in this case, and what number I'm on here, so 7 and 0. So then I can calculate without seeing the numbers when it comes around this side. I can calculate exactly how much it's moved and in what direction. 7 and 0. And then on this side we've got 8 and 70. So we just need to calculate the difference. So based on that, we know the engine is 0.7 of a millimetre off to one side, so we need to bring it back half that, so 0.35 of a mil, and that should get it pretty close to being centred. So incredibly delicate tweakage. Should have put jacking screws on this part, but I didn't. I forgot about it. So we need to go 0.3, 0.35. Let's try that. Positions you find yourself in when you're aligning engines. He's trying to get to a dial gauge that's down there. We've got face to face, top to bottom with feeler gauges perfect, like with less than a thou it's absolutely bang on, and we've got it side to side perfect. We're out by 0.11 of a millimetre up and down, so we're just going to adjust that. Right, you ready?
I think so.
Alright, here we go.
Stop, that was too much. Touch more.
I'm going to do the other side as well.
Yeah, it's still touch more.
Up, that way,
No.
other way.
Yeah. Stop. Touch. Tiny touch.
Yeah.
Yep, maybe there.
Alright.
Yep, stop. That was too much. Touch big.
I'm turning like half of what it's on the other side.
Stop.
Sometimes we have to jump from job to job on the boat, and today is no exception. We managed to be able to borrow a tool that saves us $320, but we have to use it today.
Keel on Brupeg, we've got this area just here, which is the lowest part of the boat. It's the bilge on the boat. So from this part backwards, we've got the oil tank that sits underneath the main engine, which is the tank that we've been working on up until now. And then from this part here forward, that's the bottom, that's the bulkhead for the engine room freezer, and it's freezer room beyond there. So this bit here is the lowest part of the boat. All of the water works its way down to this part here, and that's why we've got a big 2-inch bung that sits in here. This is quite common on trawlers to have a big bung right at the very bottom, so that when you haul out, you can just open it, you can put cords and hoses and all sorts of stuff up and down there. You can wash your boat out and it all just comes running out. But what that means, you get a lot of rubbish building up in the threads, and we can't screw this in without damaging the stainless threads and stainless galling. I don't want to just brute force that thread in there. So we need to tap it out. My tap isn't quite going to fit. So, I mean, honestly, it's probably a bit sloppy if we tried to use that. So we're going to have to go the next size up tap that we have, this one, which is, you know, just a small jump. But we can't get this in because someone stuck a block of wood directly under the bung when we put the boat here last. So I need to remove this block of wood to be able to do this job.
I cannot believe that went in so easily. So it's a lot of paint and just rust and junk. You can kind of see it coming out. There's no real metal in there, but the thread's dirty from garbage, and therefore we're almost certainly going to destroy the bung. I'll get a new bung, but we're almost certainly going to destroy the bung if we try to put it in. So yeah, it's a good thing we did this. But this tap's 320 bucks to buy. Thankfully I didn't have to buy one. I was able to borrow it from some friends in town. Andrew at JR McCracken, I'm going to give him a shout out because he saved us 300 bucks having to buy a tap that we're going to use once. So that's pretty awesome. We use those guys for all our stainless gear, so that's where we buy our bungs and sockets and all that sort of stuff. This is me going through where I welded it because it's pinched up a little bit when I welded it all the way around here. The diameter is probably pinched in a bit, so by doing this I'm just cleaning it out. I'm going to get a nice bond with the plug that goes in. These plugs are tapered as well, in case you're wondering. This is a straight tap. I don't have a tapering tap, but I'm also confident enough that I can seal it with a tapering bung, and I'll probably epoxy this in, and then if we ever need to undo it, just put a bit of heat on it and destroy the epoxy and we can undo it again. Alright. Socket's not a perfect fit on this. Don't have a socket that actually fits it perfectly. Okay, we're starting to get to the limit of that socket then. This would be so much easier if we could just put the boat in the lake. There we go. Getting easy. Wait, this one maybe. Maybe not. It's definitely enough. Beautiful. Beautiful. You know what, that one will probably bloody screw in. Oh, how lovely is that? Yep, that'll do. Let's get a new bung and I think we're good there. Jacking bolts have been assembled because this is stainless. I'm using a nickel based like anti-seize. These here are going to sit down like that. I'm going to push them out as far and as far back as I can, like something like that, because I want to get my dams for the chock fast in sort of behind it. I don't want to dam these guys in if I can help it. So I'm going to sand off this new paint that I've just put on and weld these guys on, do exactly the same on that side. We've got that one assembled there, and that's going to go down where those marks are that I put on. Assemble all of that up and then we can start aligning it again. We're getting so close to having this aligned right now, so we're basically centre to centre within 0.05 of a millimetre, so very close, less than 2 thou, and flange to flange we're out a wee bit, so at the top we are 10 thou bigger than we are at the bottom we're 10 thou bigger than we are at the top, which is not good enough. Some of the specs that we've read for how much misalignment you can have in shafts like this are kind of surprisingly horrific. I'll put a screenshot up right now of just what we've sort of seen advertised, and this is a pretty common number. It's not like this is an outlier. Like, we've found many websites with basically the same numbers. There's absolutely no way that we would accept tolerances this poor, because essentially the worse it is, the more vibration you feel through the boat. So we want to get it perfect, not only because it makes the machinery last a lot longer if it is good, but also you get a lot less noise through the boat because we're solid mounted. That is always going to be an issue with this engine setup. So it's worth taking the time to make sure that it's right. I need to close the gap at the very bottom of this flange, and to do that, the front of the engine, we've got the jacking screw. Jess is going to give me a hand this morning. We're going to drop the engine at the front down, and I'm going to measure how much we're going up and down on the dial gauge here. So you can see I've just got it on the sump bung and magneted to the floor. It doesn't have to be super precise, but it gives me basically the ability to see how much we're moving it, so that I can not be guessing. I can be going off measurements as we're trying to close this up. Next step, let's drop that engine down. Day 5 of trying to align this. So we've got this flange here and this output shaft here and this propeller shaft here, center to center. So when we spin it around with the dial gauge, we're within 0.05 of a millimeter, which is very close. We're happy with that. Anything under 0.1 of a millimeter and we can accept. So we're like right in the middle of the acceptable tolerance range. However, this, if I get the feeler gauges in the top here and the feeler gauges in the bottom, that's basically checking if the flanges are parallel to each other. And at the moment, the gap at the bottom is bigger than at the top. So essentially it means that the engine is sitting too high at the front. So if we lower the front of the engine, it will squash the bottom of the gap in here up. So in order to change the feeler gauge numbers we're getting down here, we have to adjust the engine at the front.
But you're talking about fine adjustments.
Yeah, super fine adjustment.
It's not.
Nah. So we're talking like maybe an eighth of a turn on the bolt at the front. We'll do maybe 2 thou down here, roughly, is what we've sort of figured it out.
Yeah.
But the thing that we're struggling with is the pivot point. So you can see this is the bolt here on the back of these mounts. It's quite far forward. It's maybe 1.5 foot forward of this flange. So if we lower the front of the engine, it's pivoting here, not back here. So what that does, instead of it just moving perfectly like that, it's actually doing that, because the pivot point is quite far forward. So if you imagine the pivot point was right back where we're trying to measure, it would just go up and down and move perfectly. But because it's pivoting back here, it's actually doing that, which makes alignment much harder. Had I known this, had I realised this, I probably would have redesigned the mounts and had the pivot point back, actually put a little tag out the back here and have the pivot point quite far back. But, you know, live and learn. Next engine I align.
How many are you planning on?
See, the trouble is it's normally like 10 years between every time I align an engine, so I forget everything I learn in that decade gap. So by the time I go to do engine number 3, I would have learned a lot, but I would have forgotten 3 times as much.
Have you shared that Gary, who checked the last alignment for the previous motor, is looking forward to coming and checking again?
Yeah. So I saw him in the yard, and so it's a cool story. Basically, the last engine that we did, I wanted to have Gary, who's a really good mechanic, double check my work, so just to make sure that what I was doing was going to be good enough. And he came in and thought that I'd been anally retentive over how good I got the last engine. I got the whole thing within 1 thou in every dimension. And he sort of looked at me, he's like, you know that no one would ever go to this level to try and get it that accurate, right? I was like, I didn't know that. And he's like, oh, you do now.
And now you're going for what?
Yeah, now we're going for half of that.
Point.
Well, at the moment I'd like it to be 0.025 of a millimetre. Yeah.
Because it's not just one perfectionist. Now there's
3.
2.5.
3.
I'm a half. I would consider myself a half.
No. There's 3. There's no half bullshit.
I can let go when I need to. Unlike you two.
Keep coming up. We've got to get to 10. We're at 8. You're at 8.5. We've got to keep coming up a little bit. Yeah, so gently up. You're at 9. Got to come up to and stop. That's 10. So let's measure that up. All right, so we've got it to the stage where it's practically perfect. However, at the moment it's measuring top to bottom, side to side, no more than 2 thou out. Around it's measuring no more than 0.05 of a millimetre. It's less than that most places. So I know it's metric and thou, but sorry. So it's practically perfect. However, when we spin the gearbox, as it sits right now, when we spin the gearbox 180 degrees, feeler gauge wise, it's measuring out by miles, 8, 9 thou, something like that. So something's not true. Something has some run out, and we suspect it's this thing here, which is the adapter. So what my plan is drop the propeller back, and that allows me to unbolt this adapter. Then I'm going to put the dial gauge on the gearbox and spin the gearbox to make sure that there's nothing going on there. I'm pretty confident the gearbox will be perfect because it's brand new. I'd be very, very surprised if this has got any faults in it. But it's possible when they skimmed both faces of this, it's possible that they weren't absolutely perfectly parallel, and therefore when we bolt everything up and we do it with feeler gauges, we try and measure it with feeler gauges, we're getting that error. And if that happens, we can't just leave it like that, because essentially you're bolted all together and you've got something that's always going to wobble like this in that system. So you're always going to get a vibration. You're going to induce vibration, which is going to wear out your bearings. It's going to cause issues in the stern gland. It's basically just something that will, over time, it will destroy the gearbox and destroy the prop shaft and the prop tube. So we have to get that repaired. Whatever it is, we don't know if that's the fault yet, but we need to make sure that that's solved. All right, so we've got the prop shaft now moved back. You can see there's plenty of clearance here. We need to undo the bolts that we've been using to spin this thing around. So let's get this back around again. Right, it's a bit of a mission to sort of lock this up. What my plan of attack is, pull this adapter off, get the micrometers onto it, and figure out if we've got incremental differences as we go around the diameter of this adapter. It should theoretically be 25 millimeters all the way around. It could be 24, could be 26. So long as it's the same, it doesn't really matter the thickness, it just has to be exactly the same all the way around. When they make these adapters, you need to machine one side, do it all, and then surface grind, flip it over and surface grind the other side so it's absolutely perfectly parallel, and then put the second spigot in. So the second spigot has to be press fit. It's a wee bit of a mission to make one of these things and get it right. If you can do it on a lathe, it's very, very difficult to get both sides absolutely parallel. That's not to say you can't. There are certain lathes out there that can, and CNC machines and stuff that can do it, but I don't think that this one has been made in that way, and I'm wondering if that's causing us the measuring errors. We won't know until we get it off and we micrometer it. I think that's going to be a problem that we can only solve next week when I can buy some micrometers that are small enough to measure this, and then also take it to a shop that can repair this. So last bolt's always a bit of a challenge to get out, but I've got two of our studs basically tied in to the 18mm threads. These are M18 bolts. This is not super tight. I did this up by hand, so it's not like I'm not going to bend these bolts or anything like that. I just need to basically jam it, so hence what I've done that. Then I can put a bit of pressure on and we can spin that off. There we go, just like that. Good. So first things first, we need to know how perfect the gearbox is. So that's zeroed out there. Within half a delineation, I'm happy with that. I'm not expecting any errors with this gearbox. Okay, I didn't move it enough. Nah, I'm not getting any errors. This is perfect. Come on. There we go. Okay, so that's perfect. It's possible I blew an O-ring doing that, but the gearbox is perfect. I don't have the right size micrometers on the boat to measure this perfectly accurate. However, I can tell you right now using vernier calipers that it's not accurate. So I found the cause of the problem. Been down the road to see the machinist. He said that he's pretty confident that he can repair the runout or potential runout that's in that adapter, but it's going to take maybe a week based on his workload. So we're off engine alignment, it looks like, for the next few days minimum. In the meantime, we're going to get stuck into the exhaust because that's the next thing that we need to get started on that engine, and we can do that now that the engine is pretty much sitting where it needs to sit. It's not bolted down yet, but that doesn't matter. We're going to have enough adjustment in the exhaust to be able to start bolting that together.